In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to draw a simple elevation from a floor plan in CAD. Once you've designed your floor plan, you're obviously going to consider your design in section and elevation. The elevation aspect is basically an orthographic projection of your construction on like a vertical plane, parallel to one of its faces. So it doesn't really represent spatial depth necessarily of like a perspective drawing would, but you can kind of give an idea of what's going on with depth with shadows and cladding and things like that. So you could add a hatch and things like landscaping to give it a little bit more sort of feel and context. Things you need to consider when you're drawing up your elevations is how you orientate the view in CAD. So, for example, I like to arrange each of my elevations around the floor plan so that I can kind of accurately align the structural features onto each elevation. Some people like to arrange their elevations in a row, so it's basically up to you how you'd like to do that, but I'll go ahead and show you how I do it. Another thing to look out for is your layering. When you're developing your elevations, it's really useful to be able to switch things on and off as you need them, whether that's providing more or less detail or whatever, but it's really good if you can try and stick to a few basic layers. I always like to include some figures and maybe some shrubs and trees and things into my elevations, just again to give it some context and a little bit of sense of scale. And likewise, adding a bit of shadow and line weights can give you a little bit of depth to your elevation and help people understand the sort of different planes of the elevation as well. So, as you're developing your elevations, these can be quite simple, but they may lead to new decisions, new changes in your floor plan arrangement, and basically lead you to alter things to improve the feeling of the space you have and improve your design. So let's get started. So here we have a floor plan which I've downloaded from bibliocad.com. I've talked about bibliocad before. It's a really great site. They have loads of CAD blocks, but they also have like whole buildings and things like that. So it's really useful for me to use these for my tutorials because I can't always use my own projects that I'm working on. So this floor plan, it's all on one level. We'll just talk through it a little bit and then we'll get started. So as you can see, there are some steps leading up onto what's like a deck or veranda area here, and steps at the back here. We've got two entrances into the building. You can see at the front here, the elevation that we're going to start working on, there's some glazing, what looks like possibly we could interpret as sliding doors perhaps. And likewise in the bedrooms here we've got more glazing. Again, these are probably going to be sliding doors, so we can have a look at that as we work up the elevation. And this is just like one big open plan kitchen, living, dining area. So let's get started. I've set up some layers just to give us a basic idea of what we want to show when we're building the model. So I'm going to start off by selecting my ground layer, and I'm just going to draw a ground line as a basic starting point. Okay. Now we see these steps leading up to the elevation would suggest that the building is actually raised above the ground. So that's what we're going to start looking at first. So I'm going to select my X lines layer here, which is a layer I like to have for making construction lines. So I'm going to type in XL for construction line and press enter. And then I'm going to tell CAD which way I want my lines to be. So in this instance, I want my lines to be vertical. So press V for vertical. So here we can now put in any construction line to help us start building the model. So I'm going to just put in two construction lines here, and that's that. I'm then going to select my floor layer. I'm going to draw a line between those two. I'm going to select that line and I'm going to move it up by 1 meter. We are assuming that the finished floor level is 1 meter above the ground level. I'm just going to move this up a little bit. Okay, so now let's start looking at the external walls. So we can still keep these construction lines because they're still going to be useful for this purpose. So I'm going to select my wall layer, and I'm going to draw my walls, and at the moment I'm going to suggest that these walls are going to be 3 meters high, so I'm going to go 3 meters, and likewise 3 meters. I'm now going to remove these because I don't need those construction lines anymore. This wall here is like perhaps a boundary wall or something like that. We can see that it's about 300 wide, so I'm just going to finish that wall off. Now on this side, however, this wall could also form part of the roof. The working out the roof could come later when we look at the section, but I've got a rough idea in my head of how I want the roof to be. So I'm just going to start drawing that across, and I'm going to line it up with that wall there. And I'm just going to amend that layer to go on to a roof layer, which I haven't created yet. So I'll put that on the roof layer, so we can start to see the difference in the layers. So let's add a bit of detail to these walls. So on this wall here, you can see this extends beyond the line of the building here, so we need to just add that detail in. So I'm just going to offset that wall. I'm going to offset by the distance that's above here, which is 300. We've got that there. We also need to start adding detail to this side, so I'm going to check I'm on my wall layer. I'm going to draw my line down because we've already lined that roof line up with the building. And now let's start putting in some of these walls as well. So we're going to go back to our construction lines. I'm going to press XL for construction line, and then going to press V again for vertical, and start putting some of these in so we can draw in our main elements. Okay, go back to my wall layer, and I'm just going to start adding these in. At the moment I'm putting them in from the top of the roof, but we can amend that in a minute. Okay, I can now remove these. So we're starting to see that the kind of openings and wall areas are taking shape. We've also got a little bit of structure going on here. So I will just grab my X lines again. So I'm now going to add a little bit of depth to the roof, so I'm just going to offset that by 200. Okay, so we can now start looking at our glazing. So I'm going to select my openings layer. I'm going to offset both the floor and the roof by 50. See why in a second. Okay, so you can see that we've got these offset lines here and here. So no glazing in this first panel. Okay, I'm now going to remove that offset line there and there. We can now create our openings out of these, so let's give them a bit of frame and depth. So I'm going to offset 50 again. I'm just going to trim this line off, so trim, I'm selecting all and I'm going to trim that. And we want to trim these wall lines that are extending into the roof that we've just created. Okay, so now it's starting to take shape. Obviously it's a very simple elevation anyway, so it's not going to look especially exciting. So we want to add in these stairs here, so I'm just going to draw a construction line to guide us in that. We'd then have some sort of foundations going on under here. These would probably be, in reality, we would have something sort of covering that base. So there will be something going on under here. So we're going to give the impression of that. And we may have some cladding going on in this section here. So let's just pop some hatch on. Going to amend the scale according to and we may want to add some hatch in amongst here as well, perhaps, to start giving a feeling of depth. We could look at adding some shadows. So shadows, you could obviously export this out into Photoshop and add shadows like that, but I'm going to show you how to do it in CAD because it is quite handy. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create two more layers. One of them is going to be the shadow layer, and one of them is going to be the outline layer. First of all, I'm going to select the shadow outline. I'm going to give it a colour, just that's different from everything else. And then the next thing I'm going to do is make sure that that layer never prints. So I'm going to click that little icon there, and that will stop that layer from printing because this is purely for us to build our shadows. So first things first, let's establish where the sun's coming from. So let's suggest that the sun is coming from this direction here. Just to help us with that, I'm going to draw the sun in there. Next thing we're going to do is we're under the impression that this roof here is extending over the external wall, so this will be creating a shadow. So I'm going to draw a rectangle, and I'm going to finish it about there. We will then hatch that. For the purpose of this, I'm just going to turn off the other hatch so we don't get confused, so that's going to be hatched there. Now this extension here of this wall will create a shadow. So can hatch that, and then we will also have shadows around the glazing. And I will copy these outlines along. Okay, so I'm now going to select my shadow layer and start filling in these shadows. Now instead of using a normal hatch, I'm going to select boundary hatch so that we can select those boundaries we've just made. So BH, boundary hatch. I'm going to select a solid hatch, and then I'm going to select the boundaries. Okay, I'm now going to switch off the outlines, switch back on our hatch, and we can start to see how this is coming together. So we also want to give a little bit of depth to the this kind of veranda or deck or whatever you want to call it. I'm just going to offset this floor by 150. Let's bring that down. I'm just going to trim that off there at the steps so we can start to see the deck there as well. And now for the fun bit, we're going to start adding a little bit of context, maybe some people, just to give a sense of scale, an idea of space, and just kind of sit this elevation into the landscape. So I've just opened up a few of my CAD blocks from the First in Architecture website. So let's start putting some of those in. So let's start off with a person. Let's take a couple of these across and we can decide at the time. I'm going to press, I'm on a Mac, I'm going to press Control Shift and C to copy, specify a base point, and I'm going to go back to my elevation drawing and I'm going to press Control and V to paste these people in. So let's have a look. Pop them in. It'd be quite nice to have this guy. If we had some sort of railing or balustrade or something, he would be quite useful, but we haven't got that at the moment, so I'm just going to pop him out of the way. Move this person across here and move this person over here. Then let's sort of develop a few bits of landscaping and things like that. Just going to create a new layer for these items. I'm just going to call it landscaping. I'm going to assume that these people are also landscaping for now. Okay, so let's go and get some trees. So let's start off with maybe one of those or one of those. Control Shift copy, base point, and then paste into the drawing. Pop them on the correct layers. Another thing you can do with these blocks, which is quite good, is I'm just going to copy this one over here, but I'm then going to scale it down so that it doesn't look like I've just copied one type of tree again and again. So I'm just going to select it. I'm going to press SC for scale, specify the base point, and I'm just going to type in 0.7. It's just going to bring it down a little bit. Another thing you can do is mirror the trees so that they don't look exactly the same. I'll bring that over, and you can also use your line weights, put your trees on different layers that have different line weights, so that then you've got some that appear more in the distance, some that are perhaps more in the foreground. That's another useful way of making trees look a bit more interesting. And we could also, I'm not going to do it now because I want to keep this as brief as possible, but we could put trees behind the building. You can then explode the block and just trim out everything that wouldn't be seen, and you'd just be left with some of the foliage around the edge of the building, which again kind of nestles it into the landscape a bit better, but we won't do that now. And then finally, let's just take a few of these sort of shrubby type things. Oops. Let's copy these across, put them on the correct layer. Okay, so now you can see that's a pretty quick way of just drawing up your elevation from your floor plan. It didn't take too long. Obviously it's quite a simple elevation. You can quite easily give it some context, give it some shadow, give it some hatch, and get a feel for the elevation without spending too much time messing around with it, just so that you can see if you feel that it's working or not. So I'm just going to now quickly show you how you would go about working up the other elevations. So I'm going to select the ground line again, and I'm going to draw. Let's assume we're going to draw up this elevation here. I'm going to draw in the ground line, and then I'm going to rotate the drawing so that we could start working up that elevation. So in order to do that, I'm going to change the UCS. So I'm going to press UCS, enter, and I'm literally going to select the first end of that line and the second end of that line, and I'm going to press enter. And now I'm going to press UCS. No, I'm not, sorry. I'm going to press plan, and then I'm going to say current UCS. And as you can see, it's rotated it so that we could now start working up that elevation, so we could start drawing our construction lines in, and away we go again. Now a quick way to get back to the previous one, we type in UCS and we literally put P for previous. I'll then type plan, current UCS, which is C, and there we go, back to where we were. So what you would end up with is 2 more ground lines, and you'd end up with your elevations surrounding your plan. So when you're working them up, it makes it much easier to line everything up and get your elevations as accurate as possible. Well, I hope you found this tutorial helpful, just to give you a starting point for working up your elevations in CAD. If there's anything in CAD you're struggling with that you'd want me to do a tutorial on, then please just drop me an email. My email is emma@firstinarchitecture.co.uk, or come see me on Facebook or comment on one of my posts on the website, and I'll be happy to try and help. Until next time.